My 5-year-old daughter uses a small wheelchair. She was playing on our front sidewalk with her teddy bear on a sunny afternoon. She was laughing and rolling back and forth a little. Then Karen from the HOA came marching up the street. She yelled, "Wheelchairs and toys are not allowed on the sidewalk. That breaks the rules and looks messy." My little girl looked up scared and said in her tiny voice, "I'm sorry, lady. I'll go inside." Karen got very angry. She pointed at a big white prison transport van parked down the street. It was there for a court case nearby. The back door was open and nobody was watching it. Karen walked fast to my daughter, picked her up out of the wheelchair, and carried her to the van. She put my crying little girl inside the dark metal cage in the back. She closed the heavy door and locked it with the big latch. My daughter held the bars with her small hands and cried loud, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm scared, let me out." Karen walked back and said, "Now the sidewalk looks clean. Stay there until you learn the rules." She looked proud and started to leave. She did not know that at that exact moment, a black truck with military plates turned fast onto our street. Out stepped a tall man in uniform. My husband, a Navy SEAL who just came home early from a long mission overseas. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with noise or warning. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary afternoons, and only later do you realize how close everything came to breaking. That afternoon began like any other. The sun was warm but gentle, the kind that makes the concrete glow without burning your skin. I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing a cup, watching my 5-year-old daughter through the front window. Her small wheelchair rolled back and forth on the sidewalk as she laughed, holding her teddy bear upright like it was riding along with her. Every few seconds she stopped, adjusted its little arms, and giggled as if the bear had done something silly. She was happy, safe, exactly where she belonged. The neighborhood was quiet. A few birds hopped along the fence. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower droned lazily. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt urgent. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked, how rare it was to catch a moment like that without worry pressing in. Then I saw Karen. She came marching up the street like she always did, shoulders stiff, lips pressed tight, eyes scanning for something out of place. Karen from the HOA never walked, she advanced, as if every step was part of an inspection. I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach, the instinctive tension you get when someone who enjoys control enters your space. She stopped abruptly in front of my daughter. Her voice shattered the calm. "Wheelchairs and toys are not allowed on the sidewalk," she snapped. "It looks messy and breaks the rules." My daughter startled. Her laughter vanished instantly. She looked up, her small fingers tightening around the teddy bear's worn fabric. I watched her swallow, gathering courage far too big for her tiny body. "I'm sorry, lady," she said in her soft, careful voice. "I'll go inside." I was already moving toward the door, my heart racing, but Karen didn't stop there. Her face hardened. "That's not good enough," she said sharply. Karen's gaze shifted past my daughter, down the street, and followed something I hadn't paid attention to until that moment. A large white transport van parked several houses away. It was clearly official, the kind used for courthouse transfers, temporarily parked for a nearby legal matter. The rear doors were open. No officers stood nearby. It was just there. Karen smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was worse. Small, certain, satisfied. Something cold ran through me. Before I could reach the porch, Karen stepped closer to my daughter. "If you can't follow rules," she said loudly, "then you need consequences." I shouted her name. I don't even remember what I said, only the sound of my own voice, sharp with panic, ripping through the air. Neighbors' curtains shifted. A door creaked open somewhere. Karen ignored all of it. She bent down and grabbed my daughter, lifting her up as my child cried out in surprise and fear. The teddy bear slipped from her lap and fell onto the concrete. My daughter reached for it instinctively, then for me, her small hands shaking. "Mommy!" she cried. Time slowed to something thick and unreal. I ran. My feet hit the pavement hard, every step pounding with a single thought. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Karen moved toward the van, muttering about order and standards and teaching lessons as if those words could excuse what she was doing. My daughter clung to her, sobbing, her voice breaking as she called for us again and again. "Please," my daughter cried. "I want to go home." Neighbors were out now. Someone shouted to stop. Someone else raised a phone, recording. The street filled with confusion, disbelief, anger, and then the sound of an engine roared louder than everything else. A black truck with military plates turned sharply onto our street, tires crunching against the curb as it stopped hard. The engine cut off, the driver's door opened, and the world shifted again. A tall man stepped out, still in uniform, his posture rigid, his presence commanding in a way that made the entire street seem to hold its breath. His eyes locked instantly onto my daughter, onto Karen, onto the chaos unfolding. My husband had come home early from overseas, and Karen had no idea who she had just crossed. That was the moment everything almost changed forever. And the moment it didn't. No one ever talks about how quiet fear can be at first. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it freezes the air, thick and heavy, pressing down on your chest until even breathing feels like too much effort. That was the silence that fell over the street as Karen tightened her grip and kept moving. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking as I ran toward them. "Put her down right now!" Karen didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Her focus was fixed straight ahead, toward the white transport van, like she had already decided this was going to happen, and the rest of us were just background noise. My daughter cried harder, her small arms wrapped tightly around her teddy bear, her face buried against Karen's shoulder. "I want my mommy," she sobbed. "Please, I want to go home." The sound of her voice sliced straight through me. Karen huffed in irritation, as if my child's fear were nothing more than an inconvenience. "You're making this dramatic," she snapped. "This is what happens when rules are ignored. Rules. That word again." I reached them just as Karen stopped beside the open back of the van. The inside was dark, empty and echoing, its metal walls cold and unfamiliar. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. "You are not allowed to do this," I said, stepping between Karen and the vehicle. My hands were shaking, but I didn't move away. "You don't have permission. You don't have authority. Give me my child." Karen finally looked at me then. Her eyes were flat, annoyed, not panicked, not uncertain. "She was obstructing the sidewalk," Karen said calmly, as if she were explaining a parking ticket. "I warned her. She needs to learn there are consequences. She is 5, I said. My voice dropped, heavy with disbelief. "She's a child," Karen scoffed. "Disability doesn't excuse disorder." That sentence sucked the air out of the space around us. Behind me, neighbors gathered quickly now. Mr. Holloway from across the street stood with his phone raised, recording everything. Mrs. Alvarez had rushed over and was shouting that the police were already on the way. Someone else yelled Karen's name, telling her to stop, telling her she'd gone too far. Karen ignored them all. She shifted her grip, trying to step around me. My daughter screamed. That sound, pure terror, raw and helpless, made something inside me snap. I lunged forward, grabbing my daughter's leg, pulling her toward me. Karen resisted, tightening her hold instead of letting go. "Don't touch me!" Karen yelled, suddenly furious. "You're interfering! I'm protecting my child," I screamed back. For a brief, horrifying second, it felt like a tug of war where no one should ever be standing. My daughter clung to me now, crying into my shoulder, shaking so hard I could feel it through her small frame. "Let her go," Mrs. Alvarez shouted. "Everyone's watching you." Karen's jaw clenched. Her gaze flicked around, finally noticing the phones, the witnesses, the mounting pressure. Her company. Infidence wavered, not because she realized she was wrong, but because she realized she might be caught. "She was going to be safe," Karen said defensively. "I wasn't hurting her." My daughter whimpered at that, burying her face deeper into my neck. I didn't argue. I didn't waste words. I just held my child tighter and stood my ground, blocking the van completely. That's when the low rumble of an engine grew louder at the end of the street. The sound cut through everything, voices crying, chaos. Heads turned, conversations faltered. The black truck came into view, moving fast, purposeful, stopping sharply near the curb. The door opened. A man stepped out who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Karen froze. My husband's eyes took in the scene in seconds. The van, the crowd, my daughter shaking in my arms. His expression didn't change much, but something dangerous settled into his posture. Calm, focused, absolute. "What's going on?" he asked. Karen stammered, suddenly unsure. I was enforcing HOA regulations. "Step away from my family," he said quietly. She didn't argue. She didn't smile. She stepped back. In that moment, the power Karen thought she had evaporated, not because of rank or uniform, but because truth had witnesses and fear had reached the wrong child. My husband came to us and knelt, his hands gentle as he checked our daughter, his voice low and steady as he spoke to her. "You're okay. Daddy's here." My daughter clung to him, sobbing, her teddy bear crushed between them. Around us, the street buzzed with anger now instead of silence. People spoke up. Phones stayed raised. Sirens could be heard in the distance, growing closer by the second. Karen stood alone near the van, arms crossed tightly, her confidence finally cracking. She had wanted control. What she had created instead was proof, and there was no going back from that. The moment my husband stepped out of the truck, the entire street seemed to change its shape. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies make it dramatic. There was no shouting, no rushing forward, no sudden heroics. What happened instead was quieter and far more powerful. The air shifted. People straightened. Voices lowered. Even the birds seemed to pause. He stood there for a second, one hand resting on the open door of the truck, his eyes moving slowly across the scene like he was taking inventory. Years of training had taught him to read chaos fast. He didn't need explanations. He didn't need context. He saw our daughter shaking in my arms. He saw the white transport van with its open doors. He saw Karen standing stiffly beside it, her posture suddenly defensive instead of commanding. He saw the neighbors, the phones, the fear that hadn't fully settled yet. And then he closed the truck door. The sound echoed down the street, sharp and final. "What's going on here?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight, the kind that comes from someone who is used to being listened to when things are serious. Karen was the first to speak. She always was. "This woman is overreacting," Karen said quickly, her words tumbling over each other now that the audience had grown. "I was enforcing HOA rules. The sidewalk was obstructed. I was trying to teach a lesson before things got out of hand." She gestured vaguely toward my daughter, as if she were an object instead of a terrified child. My husband didn't look at her right away. He walked toward us first, slow and deliberate, keeping his hands visible, his movements calm. When he reached us, he knelt down in front of our daughter, lowering himself so he was at her eye level. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "It's okay. Daddy's here." My daughter let out a sob that sounded like she'd been holding her breath for far too long. She reached for him instantly, her small hands clutching the front of his uniform, as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. "She was scared," I said, my voice trembling now that the adrenaline had nowhere else to go. "She tried to take her." He nodded once. No surprise, no disbelief, just acknowledgement. "Did she touch you?" he asked our daughter gently. She nodded against his chest. "She picked me up," she whispered. "I didn't like it. That's all I need to know," he said quietly. He stood then, slowly, placing himself between us and Karen without saying a word. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening. It was protective in the purest sense. An unspoken line drawn in the concrete. Karen bristled immediately. "You can't intimidate me," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "I have authority here. I was doing my job." My husband finally looked at her. "Your job," he said evenly, "does not include touching someone else's child," Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "You don't understand the rules of this neighborhood." "I understand the law," he replied. That stopped her. Behind us, the sound of sirens grew louder. Someone murmured, "Police are coming." Another neighbor nodded, still recording, still unblinking. Karen glanced around, her eyes darting from face to face, finally realizing how many people were watching her now. Not just seeing, but witnessing. "I was preventing disorder," she insisted, louder now, as if volume could replace logic. "If people let things slide, everything falls apart." "No," my husband said calmly. "What falls apart is safety when people abuse power." The words landed heavy. The first police car arrived moments later, pulling up beside the black truck. Officers stepped out quickly, scanning the scene, their expressions sharpening as they took in the situation. One of them recognized my husband immediately and nodded respectfully, but my husband didn't acknowledge it. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about her." He gestured toward our daughter, who was now sitting in her wheelchair again, clutching her teddy bear so tightly it seemed strained. The officers separated everyone gently but firmly. Statements were taken. Karen tried to explain herself again, talking about bylaws and appearances and discipline, but her words sounded hollow now, stripped of the authority she once hid behind. When an officer asked my daughter if she felt safe, she shook her head and pressed closer to me. That answer said everything. As Karen was guided a few steps away, she looked back at us, her expression no longer proud or certain, just angry, confused, and small. She had thought she was powerful. But power doesn't come from rules written on paper. It doesn't come from titles or committees or fear. It comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. And on that street, in the late afternoon sun, the balance had shifted completely. The arrival wasn't just my husband coming home early. It was accountability arriving exactly when it was needed most. Karen's smile didn't disappear all at once. It cracked first, as the officers spoke quietly into their radios, as one of them asked me to sit with my daughter on the curb, as another gently closed the back doors of the transport van. Karen's expression shifted in small, telling ways. The corners of her mouth twitched. Her chin lifted, then dropped. She folded and unfolded her arms like she couldn't decide what posture still worked. Confidence is fragile when it's built on intimidation. An officer approached her with a notepad. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to explain why you picked up a minor without consent." Karen scoffed, forcing a short laugh. "This is being blown out of proportion." "I was handling a violation." "A violation of what?" the officer asked calmly. "The HOA rules," she said quickly. "Sidewalk obstruction, toys, wheelchairs. We have standards." The officer paused, pen hovering. "City sidewalks are public property," he said. "HOA rules don't apply here." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Behind her, neighbors murmured. Phones were still raised. No one was yelling now. No one needed to. The evidence was already being collected in real time. Video angles from different houses, timestamps, witnesses stepping forward one by one. Mrs. Alvarez spoke first. She grabbed that child. "I saw it." "So did I," said Mr. Holloway. "I have it all on video." Another neighbor nodded. "She's threatened families before. This isn't new." That was the moment Karen's smile finally vanished. "This is harassment," Karen snapped, turning sharply. "You're all ganging up on me." "No," my husband said quietly from beside me. "They're telling the truth." Karen turned to him, eyes flashing. "You think your uniform gives you control here?" "No," he replied evenly. "It means I know exactly what abuse of power looks like." One of the officers asked Karen to place her hands where they could be seen. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. It was procedure. Still, Karen's face flushed deep red. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "I didn't hurt anyone." My daughter shifted beside me, gripping her teddy bear tighter. "She was scared," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "That matters." The officer nodded. "It does." Karen was escorted a few steps away while statements were taken. She kept talking, about bylaws, about appearances, about how neighborhoods fall apart when rules aren't enforced, but each sentence sounded thinner than the last, like paper tearing under pressure. When the HOA board president arrived, summoned by half a dozen frantic calls, his face went pale as he watched the footage on a neighbor's phone. "This isn't acceptable," he said quietly. "No," the officer agreed. "It's not." By the time the sun dipped lower in the sky, decisions had been made. Karen was formally removed from her HOA role pending investigation. A no-contact order was issued on the spot. Charges were being reviewed. The words child endangerment hung heavy in the air, even when no one said them out loud. Karen stood alone near the patrol car, her posture rigid, her jaw clenched. She looked around once more, as if searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. No one did. Power that relies on fear doesn't survive daylight. My daughter watched quietly as the officers finished their work. When one knelt in front of her and asked if she was okay, she nodded slowly. "I didn't like it," she said, "but my mommy and daddy came." The officer smiled gently. "That's what matters." As the patrol car pulled away with Karen in the back seat, not smiling now, not proud, just silent, the street exhaled. Conversations started again, softer this time. People checked on one another. Someone picked up my daughter's teddy bear from where it had fallen and handed it back with a kind smile. That evening, after the neighbors drifted home and the street returned to its usual quiet, I realized something important. Justice doesn't arrive with applause. It doesn't gloat. It doesn't grin. Consequences don't wear smiles. They arrive calmly, firmly, and without needing permission. And for the first time since we'd moved into that neighborhood, the rules felt like they might finally protect the right people. Healing didn't begin with sleep that night. It began with stillness. Our house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt before. Not empty, not lonely, but cautious, as if every room was holding its breath. My daughter lay between my husband and me, her small wheelchair parked beside the bed, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. She didn't cry anymore. That was almost harder. Instead, she stared at the wall, blinking slowly, listening to the ordinary sounds of home like she was memorizing them again. The hum of the air vent, the tick of the hallway clock, the distant bark of a dog down the street. Safe sounds. My husband stayed awake long after I thought he'd fallen asleep. I could feel it in the way his arms stayed firm around our daughter, protective without being tight, present without pressing. Every few minutes he'd shift just enough to check her breathing, like his body still hadn't accepted that the danger had passed. Sometime after midnight, she whispered, "Daddy, I'm here," he said instantly. "She can't take me again, right?" The question was quiet, careful, as if she were afraid the answer might break if she said it too loudly. "No," he said, without hesitation. "No one ever will." She nodded, absorbing the words slowly, then pressed her face into his chest. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. Sleep finally came. Not the deep, carefree kind, but real enough. I stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The march down the street, the open van, the sound of my daughter crying my name. Even though it hadn't gone as far as it could have, my body didn't know the difference. Trauma doesn't measure outcomes, it measures fear. Morning arrived gently. Sunlight crept through the curtains, landing softly across the bed. My daughter woke first. She didn't jump up like she usually did. She sat quietly, tracing circles on the blanket with her finger. "Can I stay home today?" she asked. "Of course," I said, brushing her hair back. She seemed relieved, but not weak. Just honest. That day, we didn't talk about what happened unless she brought it up. Healing doesn't respond well to pressure. Instead, we made pancakes. She helped pour the batter, giggling when a drop landed on the counter. My husband let her flip one herself, guiding her hand carefully. Small wins. Later, a counselor came by. Soft-spoken, patient, experienced with children who'd been scared by adults they didn't understand. She sat on the floor with my daughter and colored alongside her, not asking questions right away. Trust first. Words later. From the kitchen, I listened. They talked about teddy bears, about favorite colors, about what it feels like when your tummy gets tight and your heart goes fast. The counselor didn't say trauma. She said big feelings. She didn't say incident. She said that scary moment when my daughter mentioned Karen. Her voice dropped. The counselor nodded calmly. "Sometimes," she said, "grown-ups forget that rules are supposed to keep people safe, not make them scared." My daughter thought about that. Then she said, "I like rules that help." "So do I," the counselor replied. That afternoon, neighbors stopped by quietly. No speeches, no questions. Just a card, a small stuffed animal, a plate of cookies left at the door. Mrs. Alvarez hugged me tightly and whispered, "I should have spoken up sooner." I shook my head. "You did when it mattered." The city followed through quickly. New signage went up near the sidewalk, accessible area, children at play. The HOA sent a formal apology, carefully worded, legally reviewed, but still something. Karen's name was removed from every board listing by the end of the day, but none of that mattered as much as what happened. 2 days later, my daughter asked to go outside, just for a minute. Tea. We rolled out together. The sidewalk looked the same cracks, same shadows, same place where everything had almost gone wrong. I felt my chest tighten, ready to suggest another activity, another day. She stopped her chair on her own. "I want to try," she said. So we stayed quiet. No hovering, no instructions, just nearby. She rolled back and forth once, then again. Then she laughed, hesitant at first, then louder. She placed her teddy bear on her lap and waved to Mrs. Alvarez, who waved back from her porch. "The sun still likes me," she said. I swallowed hard. It always did. Healing didn't arrive like a celebration. It didn't make announcements. It didn't erase what happened. It showed up in moments like these, in pancakes flipped too early, in questions asked softly at midnight, in a child choosing to go outside again. Healing isn't loud, it's steady, it's patient, and sometimes it looks like a little girl on a sidewalk, laughing again. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she learned she wasn't alone when it did. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as patience. Sometimes it looks like restraint instead of force. And sometimes it shows up in the smallest person in the room, choosing to keep moving forward after the world tried to stop them. A week passed. The street returned to its routines, trash bins rolling out on Tuesdays, kids biking in uneven lines, dogs barking at nothing in particular. From the outside, it probably looked like everything had gone back to normal. But for us, normal had changed shape. The city followed through on its promises. Clear accessibility markings were painted along the sidewalk. A new ordinance was circulated, plain language, impossible to twist, stating that mobility devices were protected, not restricted. The HOA held an emergency meeting, this time open to residents, streamed online, recorded for transparency. Karen's removal was no longer temporary. It was final. Her name disappeared from email signatures, from letterheads, from authority, and with it went the fear she'd spread so casually. My husband attended the meeting but didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The videos spoke, the witnesses spoke, the policies spoke. Real strength doesn't demand the last word. It makes sure the right ones are written down. At home, our daughter watched all of this from a distance. We didn't burden her with details she didn't need. Kids don't heal by understanding systems. They heal by understanding safety. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch together, she asked, "Is that lady gone?" "Yes," I said. "She can't hurt anyone here anymore." My daughter nodded, considering this carefully. "That's good," she said. Then, after a pause, "I hope she learns." It struck me then how naturally compassion came to her, even after fear. Not forgiveness, not forgetting. Just the simple hope that someone might become better. That kind of strength can't be taught. It's chosen. The first day she went back to preschool, she wore her favorite shirt, the one with the bright sun on it. She insisted on bringing her teddy bear in her backpack just in case, and the teacher welcomed it without question. When we arrived, she rolled herself through the doorway without hesitation. No flinching, no looking back. That night, after she was asleep, my husband and I sat at the kitchen table, the house finally still. He turned his coffee mug slowly in his hands. "I keep thinking about how close it came," he said. "I know," I replied. "I've seen danger in a lot of places," he continued quietly. "I've trained for it, prepared for it, but seeing it aimed at her, by someone who thought they were right, that's different." I reached for his hand. "You didn't bring force home with you," I said. "You brought protection." He looked up at me then. "So did you." Weeks later, the reporter returned, not for drama but for closure. She asked if we wanted to say anything to other families, to communities watching what had happened, here. I thought about my daughter, about her laughter returning slowly, about her question at midnight, about her choice to go back outside. "Yes," I said. "Tell them this, rules should never matter more than people, and strength isn't about who has power, it's about who uses it to protect." The story ran quietly. No sensational headline. Just truth, laid out cleanly. On a warm afternoon, much like the one where it all almost went wrong, my daughter played on the sidewalk again. This time, chalk flowers joined her teddy bear. Neighbors passed and smiled. One knelt down to admire her drawings. Another asked her what color came next. She chose yellow, because it was bright, because it made her happy, because she could. As the sun dipped low, she rolled back toward the house and looked up at us both. "I'm brave," she said matter-of-factly. "Yes," my husband said. "You are," I agreed. But bravery wasn't the end of the story. The real ending, the part that lasts, is this. Strength doesn't come from uniforms or titles or rules written without heart. It comes from standing between harm and the innocent, from choosing restraint over rage, from building a world where a child can laugh on a sidewalk without fear. That's what strength really looks like. And this time, it stayed.